I think my next slide's going to bring all of them up at once, so I want to hear what you all thought first. So, number 1, good food procurement guidelines adopted by the school district. What do you think? Little or big?
Big.
Big.
Little.
Right.
Must have different experience.
Dissenting opinions.
Say more.
So I think a guideline at a school district is not a mandate and it is not a policy. So if a school district is going to have a guideline for good food procurement, that's usually something that's going to be along the lines of as similar or better. So they've got the Department of Defense and everybody else who's the main food supplier for the school district. And then there's Farmer Jane, and Farmer Jane has 50 bushels of Brussels sprouts, and they say, oh, we were going to buy 50 bushels of Brussels sprouts from DOD, and Farmer Jane's crazy, she's going to sell them to us for the same price, so our guideline says we should adopt this local farmer for this purchase, so we're going to make the purchase from Farmer Jane. So it's not a mandate, it's a suggestion, and usually, especially school food procurement systems are designed to say no. And so a good food procurement guideline creates an opportunity for school nutritionists and procurement officers to say yes. But it's not a mandate. They haven't changed the policy, they haven't done anything, they've just sort of opened a little mouse-sized door in the side of the warehouse for farmers to, throw a random Brussels sprout through. That's about it. So I think it's a little P policy.
It's interesting. So I put that it's a big P policy, and context has a lot to do with this. School wellness policies, which this might fall under, are federally mandated and would have to be legislated. So context becomes a huge factor.
I was going to say, if you're going to make up any kind of guidelines with the school systems, it's going to have to go to the school board.
You know what?
And so, that's a little P in the sense that it's not federal, but it's a big P in the sense of the parish.
Right.
It's not, I didn't say it was easy. It's a little,
I think that's how we're defining this. It's hard. It's super hard.
I would say a big P is legislated in that it has to be approved by local, state, or federal.
Well, she's focusing on guidelines.
Right. It's a good point. It's a good point.
That word alone.
Yeah.
Yep.
that's the only reason I would say.
Who said policy was boring, you guys? Look at this conversation. Okay. All right. So contentious. Maybe I'm leaning towards big P, but there's some contextual factors. See why it's helpful to have many people on a council who are around to help with these things, not just you.
We're all being recruited right now.
What about number 2? Indy Food Council committed to using a percentage of their budget to support local food projects in Indianapolis. Little P. Why?
Because they're not a government agency, they're not mandating that I put a percentage of my budget toward
Right.
it.
Yeah. Great. Number 3, Local Restaurants Association adopted a living wage policy for its members.
Yeah, we said little.
Yep, me too. The city passed a grocery store tax for food desert areas. And the city started a food composting program to divert food wastes from the landfill.
Little.
Why?
I said little because it's not something that has to be voted on by city council necessarily. It's just something that's a shift in policy within the existing program. Like the director
Muddy
of
water again, because
Sure.
if somebody gets their nose out of joint, it can get off. Then it's going to go to city council.
But I do see, it could be context. Like some places it might have to go to city council. Other places, the director of the waste management would make the call.
The comparison we were discussing is in the city of Alexandria, the mayor started working with us and other people in Pineville too to start a farmer's market and to manage a farmer's market. So they pay an employee to manage the farmer's market. Then we manage it as a partnership, but nothing was passed, like, the city council, you know, I mean, they passed some stuff, but they didn't really pass that much, especially for what they're trying to do. So for us, that would probably be considered a little P, just because we didn't have to present it, you know, it's muddy waters, right? I mean, because
Well,
it's a policy change. but
Where's
it's
the
really just
landfill,
looking
are
at
you gonna have to change,
Yeah,
see,
if
and that's
you-
when it
if you-
gets
if you-
into,
Right.
you move somebody's cheese.
If you divert the food waste from the landfill, then you have to have that designated area. Cause I don't know, I used to work at restaurants, I grew up in Florida, so we always had people who had the hogs used to come and, you know, they'd take all the slop away, you know. But I don't know, when you have that much food, you know.
Right.
So
Even at school, we always had the hog farmers there, you know, they'll come and get it. But
Yeah.
I don't know what the regulations for that now. Can you still do that now?
It depends. So it would depend if your city had a contract for waste management, waste processing, or if it was something handled by city employees. And it would also depend on your close collaboration with the health department, because food waste is a health risk,
Right.
which is insane, but true.
They used to
Great.
pull up in their truck and-
So, oh wait, look, we could have done it.
Oh.
I put little p mostly because of the program aspect. So if the city decided to mandate that composting at your homes or in your buildings was something that needed to happen, that would absolutely be a big P shift. I agree with these guys that most often, or in the situations I've been in, creating a program hasn't taken a legislated change, but it's all about context, and a lot of the points you raise can shift this. So
I like the
There you
fact
go.
that we're talking about the scale and that there isn't a single answer necessarily, but it makes us think about it. And it also takes policy from this unachievable thing to like something that could be in smaller pieces that are more accessible.
yeah, great. Yeah, I think I am hopeful that more and more we can get to that place where policy feels like a little p, and that the rules we make for ourselves are important and our organizations can make a difference.
You know, I want to say too, oh, go ahead.
But if she brought up the guidelines, and doing something that is as unintimidating as guidelines,
Air quote.
Yeah.
is a really great way to propose a change.
Right.
You know, where people aren't coming at something thinking, oh God, we're gonna have to move everything and everyone's gonna have to relearn their job, you know what I mean? It's the same thing with the
Yeah.
food composting.
I think so too, and I think it's important when you think about this and then, you know, these questions, how to frame them when we discuss opportunities as part of the Food Policy Council. You know, because we can have those conversations and look at them and say, well, is this a big P or is this a little P? And that could lead to a conversation actually how to get it done. And I think, you know, if we put this in the context of the conversations we've had and others have had at Food Policy Council meetings, and when you join the Food Policy Council, you know, it's really important to think about.
Yeah.
One of the scenarios that I brought up when the mayor of New York reduced the size of the sodas, and well, it was just, I don't know, because you work for USDA, did he just sign it and they had to reduce it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I know, I remember vaguely something about that.
Yeah. They can't
Was
set
it go
price
like
to
past
it.
like 20 ounce or something like
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
But it needed city council approval.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm sure. I'm sure it wasn't just the
Yeah.
mayor. you know.
Executive order.
Yeah. I mean, do they have those on a
If they do, they
municipality
would in
level?
New York, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I guess if you're gonna have one.
But yeah, I mean, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, that's got me thinking, like Austin has compost peddlers, which, and I think that they didn't have to get like major policy shift. It just had to be okay to separate compostables. And that's a program, it's a nonprofit that goes around and pulls the compostables that people by choice separate out and, you know, it's it's Austin, so they do it by bike, so it's really hard, and
Yeah.
Urban and Austin. But yeah, so I think that's a program that didn't require anything dramatic, but it definitely diverted food waste.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the question about sort of the mayoral mandate and the conversation about city council needing to pass that kind of moves us into the next piece, which is about networks. And just to say that, as you all probably know, when you're at a city council meeting and they approve any sort of mandate or change, a lot of conversations and relationships have happened before that point. So, I would love to, I don't know the specifics of how it happened in New York, but it'd be interesting to know how long those conversations had been happening and what sorts of conversations were necessary to get the okay.
Is that still going on? Does anybody know?
Yeah,
Still-
they can't sell the big gulps no more in New York City.
Some of you all may have seen this. The Food Policy Networks group out of Johns Hopkins just captured a lot of different Food Policy Council actions in this visual. And so I've got a link, and there's a link later, but just so you know, there's groups out there that are trying to aggregate what food policy councils are doing, and it's really helpful to look at what's happening. And then, as Chris was saying, sort of think about, Chris, right? The scale. So, maybe a city passed a living wage law, and, we can't do that, but how can we shift down on that scale, and what can we do in that realm? So we may not adopt the exact things, but it's been really helpful just to hear what other groups are doing. So that's out there. This just sort of makes it more explicit that little p is a big deal when we talk about policy shift. So anything else on policy before we shift to networks? Okay, so we, with food policy councils, are about changing policies and systems at all those scales. And we find that the construct of networks is a huge factor in how that gets done. So I just want to talk about that for a little bit and do a little bit of an activity about it. So this is that same picture, but this is why. This is one of the major reasons why networks feel super important to our work. It's important that the folks who care about health and diabetes and chronic disease are in conversation with the people who care about jobs, are in conversation with the people who care about environmental sustainability and waste reduction. That's how we're gonna design a new system that works, if those folks are talking to one another. And so that's what we mean by creating networks that work. And so just a couple of kind of concepts that we use when we think about networks. And the first is the 1-990 rule. Do you all know this sort of framework? The idea is that with anything you're doing, there are 1% of the people who are there getting the work done. They're showing up, they're getting their feet dirty, they're doing the planting, they're spending the extra hours, they're the ones who are staying late to make sure that the document that we need to get to City Council so they can consider our suggestion is ready and triple spell checked, and there's 1% of people that are doing that. There's 9% of people that are showing up to the wider meetings. They know what's going on, they can tell the story in the wider community, but they aren't sort of going that extra mile and making sure that we get across. And then there's 90% of people that might, be on the periphery and know that you exist, or might have zero idea. They're just out there doing their thing. And these folks will be in the 1% for something different. But this reality is pretty consistent and good to keep in mind. And so the bigger our network, the more people in the 1%, potentially, right? And then also just the more that we can expand our network, the more we can swap out the people in the 1%. You know, maybe we create some space for the 1% and the 9% to kind of move back and forth if we can get more people on board for our cause. So one thing that we work with. The other thing is circle of influence, circle of concern. So that same idea that I just talked about in a little bit of a different construct, kind of. The circle of influence is our ability to actually make change. So often, when we talk about little p, big P, like where can we actually affect change? Often, we don't yet have the right people, the right information to affect the change we want to see. So the circle of concern are those things we want to shift. The outcomes for number of kids with diabetes in our communities. That is way out here on the circle of concern. A lot of things have to happen to shift that. But we can do it. We can grow our circle of influence. And we can do it thoughtfully and bring a lot of different players to the table. But there's probably something we can start to do with our current circle of influence that will help us get there. Right? It's either something we can learn ourselves about what works or doesn't work, or it's meeting new people, expanding the network that will naturally expand the circle of influence. Does that make sense?
You say kind of like grabbing the low-hanging fruit type thing to get things started, and,
Yeah.
and then kind of hopefully snowball from there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Low-hanging fruit is a great way to put it. What are the things we can do now? Maybe they don't take a lot of money. Maybe we have the right people in the room for some particular piece of this puzzle. Maybe, what's your name, Eddie? Maybe Eddie knows the right, maybe Eddie's good friends with the right person. So our circle of influence just has to grow a tiny bit. We just have to pull that person in. That's sort of low-hanging fruit. And small successes move us forward. Invite that 9% and 90% in. Make it more obvious that we're here and we're making impact. So those are kind of our frameworks for networks and why they're important. And I want to do an activity, and I've never done it with this few people, but we're going to try it and see how it goes. So we also have this concept that is good enough to try, safe enough to fail. So this is so safe to fail at, you guys. We can still talk about the outcomes. So I'm going to need everybody to stand up. And I think what I'd like to do is move these two tables back, and then we'll have enough space. Thanks. Can you get out of there? Okay, so there are going to be 3 rounds to this activity.
Breakdance fighting?
Yes, you first, Eddie. So the point here is to think about networks, and there's kind of there are 3 rounds and there are 3 points. And so we're going to do all 3 rounds and then we're going to talk about it. Sound good? You guys are going to need your Post-it notes for the 3rd round, so maybe just hang on to them, carry them around. Okay, maybe I will also do this. So that's one more person. Okay, so without letting, you guys may have done this activity before, don't give it away if you have. Without letting anybody know who you're choosing, I want you to choose 2 people in the room. And when I say go, I'm going to ask that you move so that you are equidistant from the 2 people you chose. Does that make sense? Any questions? You're going to be equidistant from the 2 people you chose.
Do you want us all in here, or just wherever we are?
Well, we might end up in here, but we'll just go with it for now. Careful with Mike's equipment. Maybe we should move in here just so that we don't mess up Mike's equipment. Okay. All right. So you should have your 2 people in your head. And so now just move around so that you're equidistant from the two people that you chose. That's the point, Robert.
You've done this before.
Interesting.
Okay, yeah, so this is like
Remember this in kindergarten.
fish in water, in school.
You're not allowed to change your people.
Oh.
Don't try it. Okay.
All right, are we getting an idea here?
All right, I'm going to stop us here. I'm going to stop us here for now. Okay. Okay, so let's get back in a circle. And I'd like for us to do the same thing, but this time, one of your people needs to be wearing open-toed shoes.
All right, that's a problem.
Two people, mine don't count.
Okay,
Okay, that's gonna be tough, huh?
okay.
Okay? Go.
One of the people.
What am I gonna do?
Don't move, don't move.
Why don't you come out here, Tia?
Okay. Great. So it is, it's like a school of fish. No matter where I go, I'm gonna turn the soul around.
Okay, so you stay in the same place now.
Okay.
Oh, I need a card. Does everybody have a card?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so now I would like for everyone who has a different color card than Tia to sit down. Okay, okay, okay. So, great. We're gonna debrief that activity, but I'll just say for now that the cards, our assumption is that if you had the same color card, you had an existing relationship with Tia. So I'm trying to make some commentary on why networks are important. So you guys can all sit down and we'll see what came up for you. So it's worked okay. It's a little better with double the people. Okay, so what do you think? How was round one?
I think communication, so important to building networks.
Yeah.
Nonverbal communication in network building is challenging.
What else?
The unknown, excuse me, the unknown is very hard.
The unknown is very hard. Yep.
You know what I noticed is that there was a lot of movement, like nothing was static.
Yeah, right? So you get close to static and then something shifts and then everything shifts. Yep. Totally.
Never come to a resolution.
That's right. It's always changing. It's always shifting. Round one. Okay, what about round two? What happened when we had a focal point?
Oh, you scared me?
It shifted in more specific directions. We all shifted the same way, similar ways.
By that, and I directed your attention because if I moved,
Yep. Anything else? Round two?
We all knew where we were going.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Focus. Yeah.
And it stabilized much more quickly.
Yeah.
It was good. Everybody felt good, you know? It's like we're
Faster, right? We gotta know where we're headed. There's something that's known, right?
Mortifying.
To Derek's point, the unknown is hard. You have some focus. It's a little more clear. A little less shaky. So, great. What about round three? What about that relationship piece?
Well, I kind of felt like I was out of the loop, because I didn't have the right color.
Yeah.
Yeah, I eliminated myself.
Based on the decision you made earlier,
Yeah.
unbeknownst to you, so.
Anybody else have a?
You lose potential resources if you limit your network with whatever preconceived notions. If you will only network with people you have an existing relationship with, you're gonna miss a lot of opportunities in your network.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, I thought it was interesting. You don't really think about how you know people until you say, oh, well, we all know this one person. You know, this is how we're connected.
Yeah.
And then you sit down on the road and go, like, oh, yeah. You went to high school, you know.
Right. Yeah. Great. Okay. That's my network activity. I think that's great. I think all those things feel really true and important, and also are a lot of the goal of Food Policy Council. So in addition to shifting policy and systems, which in the little p space can happen all the time, and when you have a specific focus, let's say it's healthy food or food in schools, there are going to be gaps of time where you're working towards that, but there's not current legislation or the budget isn't up. You know, there's spaces where you know you're working towards it, but there's not a ton of work to be done in the moment. But when you're building in networks and you consider your network to be a key success factor, there's always work to be done. There are relationships to be built. There is communicating to be happening. There's information to be shared, educating people who might not know about what you're doing, why you're interested in it, how it's impacting you, how it might be impacting your kids or your church. So networking, getting people in the same space is a success.